I want to talk to you about my friend Charlie Crawford. He's a 10-time NFR qualifier.
Charlie Crawford, time to just shake it out and win. Got it on him fast, set up.
We are.
Here's a day
Nice
money
run.
lead. You betcha 3-8.
That's an absolute perfect run. Timing was perfect from the time the first swing is up. He's got the control. Charlie made it happen by being timed up with his horse with the steer, and being able to not just rope, but to pick that steer's head up without changing the momentum for the heeler at all.
We know his beautiful wife, Jackie, all three of their beautiful children, the founder of the Liberty and Loyalty Foundation, which this year will exceed $1 million raised for military and first responders. I've said it 1,000 times. Charlie, it's time to rope, nod and ride, whip and spur. I want to welcome you to the Charlie Crawford Podcast. Let's ride.
All right, Bill, we're on. How does it sound? Still sound good?
Sounds great, Charlie.
Awesome. Well, it's a pretty good practice session this morning. Excited about your new horse?
You know, it's exciting, and to have you be able to help me with that, really makes it great. I have a horse that I got. I did everything wrong. I watched it first on a video on the internet, and then I went to an online auction, and with no vet check and no papers and never seeing the horse in person or riding it, or I bought it. I actually picked it up at a Buc-ee's parking lot and brought it home, and through the magic of luck, it's turned out so far to be really something special, I think. So I'm very fortunate in that, but I would never recommend anybody doing it the way that I did.
Yeah. So so Trey Johnson and that crew over there, they had it for a little bit and was able to kind of get it going just enough for you to where you're kind of excited where it's at now. It looks like the horse is fitting you pretty good.
They did. Last November, Trey saw the horse, and then Robert O'Daniel, who works, with and for Trey, offered to take it for a couple of months and get it started on slower cattle. And boy, they just did a terrific job with it, and I'm trying to take it forward from there.
Yeah, and it looks like a good fit from the horse that you had, your good horse. So
yeah,
that's hard to find, something that fits similar to what you've gotten used to. Those are always hard, but I recommend that if a guy can.
It really is. And again, it was pure luck.
So you've done a great job with your roping. Just since I remember the first time we met there at the Horns and Heroes, the first time we had the military event in 2020 there in Stephenville, was the first time we kind of met and got to hang out, and you came to the school and the roping, and just to watch your roping evolve. And then in 2021, that event, you and Kip Heumann were high team back to win the whole thing, and didn't go as planned, but the preparation up to that point was awesome, though, wasn't it?
It really was, and yeah, unfortunately, I missed on that last year. But that's how you build, and it's probably, if I look back on it, I'm honest with myself, it's probably a good thing I did miss, because I rope a lot better now than I did then, and it makes you focus and realize what kind of gains and improvement you can make to your game, and that constant, as you constantly evolve into a better roper, better person, and make all that work. So I look back on that, and it was a positive experience. You want to win every time, of course, but it was positive, and I'm kind of happy it happened, because now I'm better off for it.
Well, and another thing that we've also learned as we've been doing this event is knowing how much a guy can kind of handle and still compete. Because I know the year after that, it was like a blur. We had so many moving parts and so many things going on. And I had talked to him like, you need to make sure you slow down and take time to get your focus, because I think that the next year, I'm not even sure if you remember roping. We had so many things going on.
That was our first year of going to NRS at Decatur, and I know we're going to talk about this, but Liberty and Loyalty has expanded so rapidly, and that was a massive year of growth. And you're right, I don't know how we did everything we did in such a short period of time, and
there's such a balance to being able to. That's what I always give so much respect and props to Trevor Brazil. The amount of things that guy and my wife, the amount of things they can juggle and still hold their focus. It's hard to do, to compete and then still have all these moving parts going.
It really is.
But last year, I thought you did it. You nailed it. Last year we had, and we were starting to get a better team and more of a team. I wouldn't say a better team. We're starting to get more members to lighten the load, and we're getting, and our team just keeps getting stronger every year. And last year I thought you did such a great job of getting your focus. You roped great last year, made it to the NFR showdown, and spun the wheels off that steer in the last one. I'm telling you, it was to win the short round and possibly win the whole thing. But I'm telling you, 2 swings, roped him and spun him off. You're going to be 5.
It was good. I mean, obviously you got to get the right steer, and get the right start, and we did on both ends of that, and away we went, and it felt really good. So that goes back to what I'm saying, though. The miss before that, because it makes you realize what you've got to do to step your game up to get to that next point. You never be satisfied where you're at.
I think you and Kip are due this year because you missed the first year. Then this last year, Kip missed because I think you spun him so fast. And I think this year, I think you guys are going to win the whole thing.
Well, that's the plan.
Awesome. Yeah,
I'm
the plan. Excited. It was fun. How fun is it to rope in that situation where it feels, that's pretty much the exact same dimensions as the NFR.
Yeah, that's true across the board. I love that love competition, obviously, or I wouldn't be sitting here, with you. The competition side of it is great. Putting yourself out there where you can succeed or you can fail, and be willing to do that. I've always said, you fail at 100% of the things you don't try. So, getting out there and doing it and being in that environment, that's what makes me go.
Yeah, it's fun, and it's fun to watch how you guys are able to get another outlet that inspires you guys to give you something to kind of fulfill that void a little bit that sometimes a guy doesn't, because there's some adrenaline. Like I've watched you guys when you back in the box. I've seen some of them horses. It looks like a cartoon character with their eyes about to bulge out of their heads. They're wondering what kind of mountain lion is on the top of them, because it's fun to watch those guys kind of get that adrenaline back in that competition. And I love watching them guys that choose this to be their outlet.
I agree with that.
Well, Bill, you've had one heck of a career. You've had 22 years in the Marine Corps. You were a lieutenant colonel and helicopter pilot, 20 years in the law enforcement. You were a helicopter pilot for the Perot family and their business. You had a master's degree in flight test technology. And now for fun, you are a canine handler for the search and rescue. And you're also a board of director for the Liberty and Loyalty Foundation. And some of the times that we've just sat and talked, it's like, I can't believe you're not 185 years old with all the things that you've done. Like, it makes me feel like I've never done anything with my life when I look at the resume that you have.
I think sometimes I feel like I'm 185 years old.
Well, I'd love to go down kind of what we want to talk about. I'd love to talk about the Marines, the law enforcement. Can't wait till we can talk about the Perots and their family business and the things like that. I remember when you took me to their museum. I can't wait till we talk about that. Talk about the canine. I love the search and rescue. That the stories you have on some of the things and people that you found. But then I also want to kind of talk a little politics and kind of what your thoughts are on all the things that are going on from your perspective. And then we'll finish it off with the Liberty and Loyalty, and as we're getting ready for our gala at the end of the fall, and our Horns and Heroes, and then on to our hero celebration. But so you started off being in the Marines for 20, and so what got you in the Marines? What was?
Well, it's not a great story. So I came out of college with a degree in criminology, but I was one of those guys that really shouldn't have gone to college right out of high school, which I did. I should have done something else. I wasn't mature enough for that. And I was very fortunate to play tennis in college and play on scholarship. And so my goal coming out of college was to be a professional tennis player. And after about 6 months of that, I realized that I was going to be a starving professional tennis player. I didn't have I wasn't at that level. But it was, it was great trying. So of course
So tennis was your passion in high school. Got you to where you could go to college playing tennis.
It was tennis and skiing. I did a lot of both. I mean, my folks were extremely active. My dad was an avid skier, tennis player. So was my mother. My dad, managed a ski slope for the university that he taught at. So, that's where I grew up, and got to do that stuff. But of course, if you can't be a professional tennis player, then of course the natural thing that follows up next is to go into the Marine Corps.
That sounds natural.
Yeah, I have no idea. I actually thought I was going to be a Navy pilot, and I walked into the recruiting office to take the exam. I had scheduled with the Navy recruiting officer, and he was literally out to lunch. And a Marine major came up, introduced himself, shook my hand, tried to break every bone in it, and said, "Son, you don't want to be in the Navy. You want to be a Marine." And at that point, who was I to argue? And 22 years later, there we were. So that's how I went. That's how I got in the Marine Corps. I had never flown up to that point. I went to officer candidate school and did pretty well. Went to the basic school after that. Did pretty well. Got to flight school in Pensacola. Wanted to fly helicopters and got that opportunity. Wanted to fly Cobra helicopters, and that's what I got to fly. Active duty in the fleet. My Marine Corps time was divided between active duty and reserves. So when I went to the reserve side, then I transitioned aircraft to the CH-53 Sea Stallion, which is a pretty big difference from the Cobra. The Cobra weighed in at about 12,500 pounds, and the 53 that I flew came in about 42,000. So a little bit of a change there. But I also, and the reason I went to the reserves.
What were some of the changes?
Oh, just the size, the sheer size of the machine.
With the size, would one be a little faster than the other because it's lighter?
Actually, the 53 in terms of straight speed, straight and level speed was faster than the Cobra. In a dive, the Cobra would be faster, but they're comparable in that regard. But again, a different mission. With the Cobra, you're doing armed escort and close air support because it's an attack helicopter. With a 53, you're a transport. So the Cobras are protecting you as you transport, other Marines and equipment, into the battle. But anyway, so the reason I left active duty to go to the reserve side, I love the Marine Corps and I wanted to stay, but I kind of felt that I owed it to the education that I had, and I really wanted to utilize my degree. I had an interest in law enforcement, and so I opted to do that. So while I was in the reserves, I went to the Baltimore City Police and became an officer there, and flew with their aviation unit. And then shortly, I stayed there for about 3 years. And then between officer candidate school and the police academy, I decided I guess that wasn't enough. So I went to the state police and did another police academy. And so that was Maryland State Police. And I was both on the road and in aviation as well there. And so that was a great opportunity. Again, as I've said many, many times, I never had a bad day at work. I've had some pretty difficult ones, but I never had a bad day. There are tough times, but we all have tough times, but it's how you handle it. So I loved everything about the Marine Corps. I loved everything about, the law enforcement side.
How do you think you were able to handle it where there wasn't the PTSD or the scarring or the things that a lot of the guys deal with these days?
That's a great question, and I don't know that I'm qualified to give you a great answer on it. For me, I've always had the ability to compartmentalize and deal with what I'm involved with right now, and then when that's when something else comes up, push that off to the side for a while, and again deal with it later. Don't let it gnaw on you. I think also staying active in other things, with your family. We have 4 daughters, so getting involved, staying with them. I didn't dwell on things, and then, I always have looked at it, particularly on the law enforcement side, where I didn't create any of the problems that I had to deal with. I was there to help, and I've carried that through, and even on my search and rescue side now. When I go, I know we're going to touch base on this, but when I go look for somebody, sometimes they're deceased when if I find them. That probably happened long before I even got the call to go look for them. So if I can help a family by, I'd rather have me find a kid than a family, then so be it. And I don't have that emotional tie to it. I have more of a service outlook. This is what I'm doing to help others. And so that's how I personally deal with it. I don't know that works for everybody, but for me, for 185 years, it's worked pretty well.
Yeah, I would say so. Where was some of the places you got to see when you were in the Marines? I know you've been stationed in a few other places and some tours. And what are some of the places you got to see?
Well, the places I probably would have never got to go to, otherwise. Obviously, in today's world, a lot happens in the Middle East, so we spend some time over there. I've been to most of the European countries, some of the Scandinavian countries, most of the Middle Eastern countries. What I didn't get to do was go anywhere south. So I haven't didn't do anything in Africa and South America and those areas. But North Africa, I say North Africa we did see. So those are the areas. The Philippines. Now I'm not. The Philippines is south, so I did spend some time there. We did the evacuation when Mount Pinatubo erupted, the volcano, and so I spent some time over there with flying CH-53s evacuating U.S. people, dependents and service members. So it's been great. Japan, Okinawa, the Philippines, Korea. Even some of the what we call the sandbox, some of those countries, there's a lot of it. There's always interesting things no matter where you go if you look for them hard enough.
Yeah. That's probably one of the few things that I remember my dad didn't talk about it much. He was a Marine, but he talked about Okinawa and being over there a little bit, but he didn't really talk about much. But
one of the things, obviously I was, flying, I was based aboard, ships quite a bit when we went out there. So you'd see different ports, you'd spend 2 weeks in Greece and then 2 weeks in Italy and 2 weeks in Spain and those kind of things. Where you're not stationed there, but you're seeing them, you're visiting, you're flying around those countries as you're there. So yeah, it was certainly things I would have never seen had I not done it.
One of the things I remembered rodeoing, most of the stuff that I had seen was on the western side of the United States. We didn't get to go back east a whole lot, but I got to go up to Canada quite a bit. And when we went up to BC, we've been up to a few rodeos up there. And some of the glaciers, just some of the big mountains are just straight up in the air. And I remember one time we drove down in this little town, and it was a tiny little old town, but there was snow up the back of this mountain, and you could see this little old town. You kind of coming down through it, and you could see the town kind of reflect off the snow that's in the mountains. And it was one of those things where you drove through there, and you'll never forget it. Probably one of the coolest things that I'd ever seen. What's some of the coolest stuff that, like, when you've been there, that, like, man, that was some of the coolest stuff you've ever seen, some of the places that you got to see?
A lot of it's here in the United States. Seeing the world from 500 feet in a helicopter is stunning. It's not like being in an airliner, where you're up at 30,000 feet or so. You really can take in a lot. So Monument Valley, here is absolutely gorgeous. Flying through the Sierra Nevadas, when you're going through the valleys and such there. Spent quite a bit of time flying up in the Cascades. I don't know if the areas you're familiar
Northwest.
with. Yeah, and absolutely beautiful. Coming down the Snake River, flying that. Really something. So that was great. My favorite place outside of the United States to fly and to see was probably the Philippines. I really enjoyed that a lot. The people there were just outstanding. And we were there under very difficult situations because the volcano was erupting actively while we were there. And there was a lot of death and destruction and so forth. But amidst all of that, the people have a great spirit, and we did a lot with and for them. And what a beautiful country. And it's interesting. Now when you call for service for something, you can tell that the person that you're talking to sometimes is outside of the United States, and I can always tell if it's a Filipino. And so I'll say, and then not too long ago, I had a talk with a young lady, and she's very pleasant, and her grandparents. This is how old I am. Her grandparents were evacuated by our unit while we were over there for the Mount Pinatubo evacuation. So pretty neat.
What were the things you think that stood out to you that was like, wow, that was really cool? What was so beautiful about it? What stuck out to you?
Oh, it's the totality of it. I don't know that it's one certain thing, but when you fly, we'll take Mount Rainier for example. So when you're flying toward that, the day that I remember up there, just perfectly clear, blue sky, and then you get the snow-capped peak, and just that whole, the totality of what you see from that distance is just phenomenal. So things like that. Monument Valley, again, I flew that as the sun was setting, so you get all those different shades of yellows and oranges and things. And again, while you're flying, of course, then that picture's constantly changing. It's not the photograph that you see on the wall and you see isn't that beautiful. Every split second, you now have a different view, slightly from what it was before. So aviation really is a very special thing, and gives you a lot of good memories.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of good pictures could be taken from that.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
From that site. I remember talking to Big John Drew and was asking him and talking to him about some of the fascinating places that he had got to see, and he was talking about Panama. And he said when he was down there, he said when the sun goes down, he said the jungle comes alive. And he says just the sounds that you'll hear, and he was just talking about just how fascinating it was and scary at the same time. I mean, just because there's so many things out there, but yeah, just the way he used to. Yeah, the things that he would describe, that the sounds and stuff, just how that whole place came alive at night. It was fascinating to hear. Well, I'd love to talk about your time with Ross Perot and his businesses. I was a huge Ross Perot fan as a young kid. My dad voted for Ross Perot. My dad loved his politics. I remember because my family grew up Democrat. We were my mom and dad or my stepmom were both in the union, and so there was more working class back then, and so supposedly the Democrats were going to take care of the workers at that point in time. And so as we remember watching debates, my dad just loved this Ross Perot. He handled the presidency like a business, but he ran as an independent. So obviously it wasn't as popular, but we were on one side of the living room while my stepmom and the girls were on the other side. And it was a divide back then. So I remembered it quite well, but I was a huge Ross Perot fan. So when we got to actually go to that museum, when you took me there, it was fascinating. But we'll talk about that later. But you got an opportunity to work for Ross Perot. How did that come about?
I did. It was really great. So between my retirement from the Marine Corps and my retirement from the state police, I was actually the chief helicopter pilot at what was then called Eurocopter. Today it's called Airbus Helicopters. And so I had a great job. And that's what actually brought me to Texas was that job. And then one day I got a phone call, and it turned out to be basically an invitation to come interview and see if this was a position that I would be interested in. It wasn't advertised. They're very selective, of course. So it was word of mouth, and somebody recommended that I might be good for this. So I did. I went and met with both Ross Perot Jr. and his dad. And I was there for 12 years, until I retired again. And they were, I can't say enough good things. Again, it goes back to you never have a bad day. Difficult days, but no bad days. I was the only helicopter pilot, so that was kind of unique, and kind of got to make my own program, if you will, that was so that I could provide both the family and the businesses that were involved with the greatest service, that I possibly could. So wonderful opportunity. Got to meet a phenomenal number of people, and just again, really blessed to be able to do that.
Now, how many years did you start working? How many years after when Ross Perot ran for president? Because you didn't work for him then, correct?
No, I was.
How many years after he ran for president, you start working for him?
Well, I guess that would have been about 15 years
later.
After he did, yeah.
I couldn't remember. Was it in the 90s? Was it early 90s or
early
mid-90s?
80s?
That's when he was running for president. Got it. Couldn't
Yeah,
remember the timeline.
and actually, you talk about the museum. If you remember, when we were in there, all of the charts that he used to display, if you look at them in the context of today, he was right.
Yeah, it takes a businessman to be able to know how things work. I loved what was the line? Remember the line that he gave Bill Clinton, and I think Bill said, "Let me tell you something, Ross," and Ross goes, "I'm all ears, Bill." That was one of the best lines. I loved his comedy.
Well,
he was Trump back then. He was a business guy, wasn't he?
He was, definitely business and self-made.
Yeah,
completely. It's a wonderful story. The thing that is amazing about Mr. Perot and Ross Jr. and they build the organization around people, and they take care of the people. And they empower the people to do the job. And that makes that organization so strong. And you never had the feel, when I was there, I never, ever had the feel that I was just there to support them in gaining wealth. I always had the feel that this was a very much of a team effort in building these companies. Now, they're obviously very successful, financially, which is great. That's the way it should work. But they are people. Mr. Perot used to say, you surround yourself with eagles. That's how you succeed. So it never felt like they were in it for themselves. Never, ever. And that's, to me, that's a very important thing, that you're there to build and to grow and to nurture and, develop your talent. And so that's, I try to carry a lot of that into what I do as well.
Well, I had noticed that when you took me in there to Ross Perot Jr.'s business and got to meet Brett and all the people working for him there at Hillwood and Hillwood Land and Cattle, and everybody, it was a team effort. Nothing was talked bad about. Everything was we and where we're going with this. Like, they knew so many things, and everything was so upbeat, and it was a culture that was like, man, this is awesome. Like, this was such a great culture that you could tell, like, everybody there believed in what they were doing, and it was all kind of working towards a common goal. It was a great culture of work environment, from his employees to being in the office and being able to talk with Ross and just how present he was. He's such an easy guy to talk to.
Oh, extremely. And I think that's emblematic of what they're all about. He's not this guy that is unapproachable at all, and his dad wasn't that way. They were just great people.
How did his dad become successful? Because I think the stigma that I remembered when I was a young kid is they thought he was an oil tycoon, but that wasn't the case, correct?
No. This was he was a Naval Academy graduate, and then that led into then a computer. That back then mainframes, as big as your house. And so and he went to software, and the software was the catalyst. So EDS, electronic data systems, is where he really got started.
And that's where he made his wealth start was computers, correct?
That electronic data system was the real catalyst, the real beginning of that family, I guess.
And then so Ross was in the Navy. And then Ross Perot Jr., wasn't he in the Air Force?
He went into the Air Force Reserve. He was a jet pilot, flying F-4s out of what used to be called Carswell Air Force Base, which is now, it's in Fort Worth, which is now the Naval Air Station Fort Worth Joint Reserve Base. And, Ross is a very accomplished pilot. He still flies. He flies helicopters a lot. He and another gentleman, the two of them were the first to fly a helicopter around the world. They did it in 30 days, took off from, Dallas and landed right there back in Dallas 30 days later. So just a terrific story there. And, he still flies the Gulf Streams and that they have for their businesses and family. And then, another, T-38 and so forth. So, avid aviator, aviation enthusiast, and again, that it kind of all goes back to the same thing. It's well rounded. It's taking care of people. It's being involved, And so that's it's a great story.
I didn't realize how much clout he held, I guess you would say. Then when we went through that museum, and he had a lot to do with what was the deal in Iran, maybe in the 90s, where there were some Americans held hostage.
Right. When the Shah of Iran was overthrown and there were some American hostages, they were from EDS, electronic data systems. And so Mr. Perot was instrumental in gaining their release.
Now, the government wasn't allowed to go in there. There was some story, if I remember, we read about, or maybe you told, where he basically took it in his own hands and got it done. Was I correct, if I remember that story right?
Well, there's a book called On Wigs of Eagles, and it outlines that pretty well. And what he did was he facilitated the release of those.
So what do you mean facilitated?
He aided in their release.
If I remembered right, if I read it, he basically went and found the best guys in the world and went and got it done.
We didn't have diplomatic relations with, with the Ayatollah Khomeini at that time. So, Mr. Perot was instrumental in getting them back out safely.
Yeah, because that was the one thing I didn't know watching him run for president, was how much of a patriot bone and how much he loved this country and how much of a military background that him and his family had. Until, you took me down to that museum. But I loved when we got to go and you showed me and said, "Hey, Charlie, come take a look at this." When we looked at that glass case and it had a stick in there, and he goes, "Read it." And I said, "Well, that's bin Laden's walking stick." I'm like, how does Ross Perot have that?
Well, he was well connected.
Obama didn't have it. Joe Biden, the vice president at the time, didn't have it. Yep. Ross Perot had it. How did Ross Perot have bin Laden's walking stick?
I can't answer that question. I just know that it's on the wall, and he had at that time some very good friends.
Wow, that was that was probably the most amazing thing that I seen. I would have thought that the president, vice president, or someone in that organization or administration, I guess you'd say, but no, it was him. That's a lot of respect amongst the military.
Well, that one incident aside, I mean, they've supported, the whole family, with Mr. Perot and Ross Jr. have supported the military and continue to do so. They're constantly, hosting events. The folks that were involved with Somalia, they've had that group, out at the ranch. They host the Air Force Base and their families every year, Memorial Day. So they're constantly involved with, trying to make things better and picking up loose ends where, perhaps the government doesn't do as much as they could.
It was such an honor to be able to go with you when you invited me. After that, I think that second or third year we had the event, we got to go, and your card still worked. We snuck in and got to go up there and go to his office, and I got to meet him, and that was an honor because, like I said, I was a huge fan of his dad, and they're a big part of. They're our title sponsor for our military event because of you and because of your relationship with them, and so yeah, it's great to have them on board with what we're doing. But also, too, I thought it was fascinating when we were up there in his office and we were just kind of discussing politics and things like that. And I think it was right after Trump had lost, if I remembered right, in 2021, I think, when we went back in there maybe for a follow-up. I forget which one it was, whatever year it was, but it might have been a year after maybe he supposedly lost the election. And we were kind of just talking about what we think is going to go on with Trump. Where do you think the nation's going to go from here? We were just basically talking freely. And he says, well, if he doesn't stop trying to run for president, he said, I bet they try to bankrupt him. I bet they try to ruin him if they don't try to throw him in jail or if, they don't try to pick him off. And that was in 2000, I think 22, if I remembered right. And so,
it would have been 2 years ago.
2 years later, he pretty much called everything exactly what they're trying to do.
Well,
it's fascinating, isn't it?
It's a sad situation, and I look at it and, if you take leave the names out of it for a moment, I think that as a country, we've lost a lot of our guidance. And, my dad, you go back, every generation is different. You go back to my dad, and, he would, of course, he revered Walter Cronkite, and that was the last great, real reporter that existed in his mind. And I don't know that I disagree with that now, but you always think things are going to be worse. My dad would say, these guys, look at these guys over here, racing these cars, they're punks. Well, it turned out to be those punks were the guys that went to Vietnam. Okay, they really weren't. It's just the culture at that time. Mm-hmm. But I think now, unfortunately, we've lost a little bit of our compass, which way we're going here. And I don't like to see that. We've got a divide in the country. And, my way of thinking, the government should be made up of not just the elected officials, but the non-elected as well, the bureaucrats, as we call them. That they need to be people that want to serve. I don't think we have a lot of that anymore. We have a lot of people who want to be there because it's great pay, it's great benefits, whatever their motivation is. We don't have statesmen anymore. We have politicians. And in my world, my mind, there's a very distinct difference between that. I think Mr. Perot would have been a very great statesman. I think our last statesman was President Reagan. Mm-hmm. After that, I think we've had too many politicians. I think the office of president, vice president, and so forth needs to be, how do we serve the American people, not how do we push an agenda that, in this case today, half of us like, half of us don't like. So no matter who wins, I mean, if the current president, Biden, wins the election this fall, then that administration and that party is going to push, an agenda that half of us are not going to like. If Donald Trump is the nominee on the Republican Party and he wins the election, then the same thing is going to happen. We have half of the people who are not going to like it and not like it at all. And so I think there needs to be a real shift. And the problem is, how do you get there? How do you recapture lost ground, so to speak? I think that's very difficult. And I think it has to happen with, I'll use the term politicians, although I hate to, but you have to have elected officials at all levels, from the president on down to, your local, judges and mayors and so forth, where they are there to serve. They're not there for their own, how do I push this agenda? Government is too big. I don't think most of us agree that that's the case. And it's too big because everybody's had an agenda. How do I get mine? I want to make my department bigger. And this is going on for decades. I remember even in the Marine Corps, when we get to the end of the fiscal year, if we, flying Cobras, if we had ordnance left, the beginning of September, because the fiscal year ends in the military at the end of September, if we had ordnance left, we got sent out to just shoot it up. Because if we didn't shoot it, we didn't get that much next year. So you're constantly, building your little empire, building your, and it's a flawed system. I think it's extremely flawed, and it's unfortunate. But hopefully, you always have to have hope. And although I also say that, hope isn't really the deal, it's a plan. You have to have a plan. But we have got to get back to where we have statesmen in positions of power, in positions of leadership. And I don't see a lot of that going on right now. I see it's interesting, Charlie. In my Marine Corps career, leadership was emphasized from day one. I mean, absolutely day one. You led by example. You put yourself out there for your troops. You took care of them first. You made sure that in any situation you could, that you made it better for them. Okay, and there were some untenable deals you got into. I mean, you can imagine the stuff that our military gets involved with. Even when you're not in war, okay, go live on a ship for 6 months, with 3,000 other guys, okay, and I mean it's not a great environment day in and day out. The scenery doesn't change much, just nothing but water a lot of times. How do I make my troops? How do I keep them engaged? How do I make them want to do the job? The answer is not just throwing a paycheck at them or, giving them a couple of beers, on a Saturday or something. It all comes down to leadership. How do I motivate and lead these young men and women? And we don't have that today, unfortunately, in our government side. I'm sure, the military side. Our youngest daughter is a Coast Guard officer. She went to the Coast Guard Academy by appointment, and she now is a lieutenant commander. And so I see what's going on through her eyes, and I don't like it. Again, there's too much emphasis on the things that don't matter, shouldn't matter. It's the social agenda, the social engineering side of it. And that's not what government's here for, in my mind. And that's what your state or your local communities. You come up with your regulations and your rules, and if you don't like it, move. But your government shouldn't be that way. And the sooner we get back to having guys and women who are there to serve as opposed to get, I think we'll be better off. I hope that answers your question.
Do you think that's a realistic option? Because it seems like they've made that the politics so ugly and nasty that anyone with any right mind doesn't run, because it takes a brass bald bastard like Trump to be able to have enough gall to be able to go through all the stuff that he's doing. They're suing him for no reason. He's hundreds of $1 million now that they're doing the same thing with everyone around him. And
I don't know I don't know how it's going to be fixed. I haven't seen the person that I think can fix it. I know who I'm going to vote for, but I don't know that that's going to fix it. That's going to delay
what I'm saying.
I don't like.
What I'm saying is love Trump or hate him. I love the fact that no one would, in my opinion, no one could be running this himself through what he's going through if he didn't love this country, because he didn't need this. And what I'm saying, like he could just pull out and he could just go along with his happy billionaire life, but he really does feel like, in my opinion, is trying to do what's best for this country. What I'm saying is, if that's happening to him, what about the next guy that truly wants the best for this country? I mean,
well, that's what
they're
I'm saying.
doing everything to him under the sun, and none of it's working. His rating is going through the roof. I think they said he's over $200 million since they convicted him.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. We have this divide that is horrible, and because of that, we don't have the ability to move ahead. I mean, watch these cable news channels right now, and it's unbelievable. I mean, it's just negative this, negative that, negative this, negative that, constantly on any topic you want to pick. I mean,
so I've quit watching the news. I used to be Fox News. I don't watch any of them now. I really don't think, in my opinion, that I'm able to get the news that we're after in the 2-minute sound bites that they give us.
Well, it's not news. It's again,
propaganda.
It's an agenda.
Yeah. This is something that I listened to the other day. I was wanting to get your take on it and see what you thought about this.
The HR Bill 8081. Have you read this? I'm going to read it to you. So this is called the Disgraced Former Protectees Act. If you can go to the other link, Rob, right there, I just want to read it to you. So this is April 19th, 2024, right? Which is 6 weeks ago. Ranking Member Thompson introduces legislation to ensure no Secret Service protection for convicted felons sentenced to prison. Who's he talking about? There's no way they're talking about a president here, right? So let me continue. Today, Representative Benny Thompson, ranking member of the Committee on Homeland Security, introduced a Denying Infinite Security and Government Resources Allocated Toward Convicted and Extremely Dishonorable Former Protectees Act, or the Disgraced Former Protectees Act. What are they talking about? This legislation would reform the U.S. Secret Service Protective Mission by automatically terminating Secret Service protection for those who have been sentenced to prison, keyword, sentenced to prison, following conviction for a federal or state felony, very specific who they're targeting, clarifying that prison authorities would be responsible for the protection of all inmates regardless of previous Secret Service protection. Here's the key sentence. Unfortunately, current law doesn't anticipate how Secret Service protection would impact the felony prison sentence of a protectee, even a former president. Okay, this legislation was co-sponsored by Representative Troy A. Carter, Barbara Lee, Frederica Wilson, Yvette Clark, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Jasmine Crockett, Joyce Beatty, and Steve Cohen. So, as a regular person who's not in this space, I'm not a lawyer, I don't have judicial watch.
So what's your take on that?
Well, again,
that's why I don't watch the news. I haven't seen anything on any of the regular news. That's Patrick Bet-David on his show, and him and that Tom Fitton on that Judicial Watch. Like, those are the guys to me that are actually doing the journalism. That's concerning little Bill right there.
It's bringing these things to light. But again, go back to let's take it back up to the 30,000 foot view. We have this divide. So that, the left is trying to beat the right. Of course, the right's trying to beat the left. And that's one of the tactics that you use. Okay. Well, they introduced the bill. Now, the bill won't see the light of day, because it's in the House. So that'll never, the speaker will never let that happen. But it's been introduced. Okay, it doesn't mean it's law. It's never going to be law. Now, if the Democrats become majority in the House, then it could. They could pass it. Of course, then you got to have the Senate pass it, and those things get. There's a lot of bills that get introduced that you and I would strongly disagree with. Okay, and there are ones that we get introduced that we would strongly agree with that also never hit that never see the floor. So it doesn't surprise me. But again, it goes back to my same premise that we have this divide, and it's because we don't have leadership. It's all about, how can I stick it to the other guy? Okay, how can I make the other guy look bad?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what it's so disgusting just to watch it. I mean, it throws you in and I think it's just to trigger that emotion to where you get so mad and frustrated where you can't stand the other person. And it feels like it's propaganda. It feels like that's what the agenda is.
It is. But the agenda should be the improvement of American society. Okay. The protection of America. That's the federal government's job, right? I mean, look what they've done at the southern border. I mean, it's a disgrace. Okay, and now it's all politics. It's all politics. Well, we're going to let 2,500 a day come through, and after that, what nonsense?
There's been word that I've heard that, and like I said, I don't know how true this is because I was watching on one of the podcasts, but they talked about where a lot of, I think the Congo has cleared some of their prisons and has sent them through the southern border along with Venezuela. Now, whether that's true or not, either way,
well, if
we don't know who it is, how the heck do we know it's not them?
Yeah. I mean, can you name another border in the world that's open that you can just cross freely as you want?
Yeah, you can't go to Canada that way. Not even from here.
No. You can't go to Mexico that way.
Yeah.
So
what do you think the reason behind that is? Why are so many people flooding here? What's the purpose for that? Because this is something that could stop. So what is your take on what the reasoning for letting these people through are?
Well, I think the hope is that they'll become part of the left's base going forward, whether it's this generation or the next generation. It's long term. It's not today. They're not going to vote. You bring them in to vote. Well, maybe not today, but what about 10, 15 years from now? This solidifies
long-term play,
right? Can solidify a base and so forth. And I think, again, I go right back to. If we had statesmen, we wouldn't have this. We wouldn't have this. Yeah.
So in my opinion, I think we've lost track on what the government's job is. The fact that they're supposed to be working for us, and it has flipped. We feel. I mean, as a citizen, it feels like we are hamsters on a wheel right now, trying to make enough money to where we can barely survive. I mean, they've got us slaving now to a time clock that then whatever we make, they tax the hell out of, and they're dishing us down what our rules are, which is completely opposite of what this country was founded on and supposed to be.
Absolutely.
But
if we would go back to the Constitution and
yes,
and
I totally agree, because
granted,
I'm not left or right. I'm all about the Constitution.
Yeah, and that's what it should be. And this is one of the things that I've given. I think about this, often, is people haven't changed. People don't change. I mean, people are people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we live about the same lifespan as, plus or minus a few years as we have, for a long time now. Technology changes, but people haven't changed. So we've tried to, we change everything with these massive changes based on stuff as opposed to people. And I think that's wrong. Again, because it goes back to what should the government do? What should they be concerned about? They should be concerned about us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not,
Doesn't feel that way.
if I release this many, millions of gallons from our strategic oil reserve, how high can I go up in the polls, this week? And I think that is just, and both sides have done it. And I think it's absolutely wrong. Or, you pick any, and the pandering that goes on to, the various groups, I am as sick and tired as I can possibly be of talking about, well, it's white privilege, it's this, it's slavery, it's the Latinos, it's, we're human beings, period. We don't get to choose what what our ethnicity is or where we came from. We don't choose that. So you're just people.
Yeah.
And why we can't understand that is just beyond my comprehension.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it feels planned. It feels like this is, I don't know. I've got a lot of conspiracy theories, but one of the things I think, like for me and a lot of the people that I talk to around my circle is, what we feel like Trump is our best option, at least that he's not a bureaucrat. He doesn't like Biden, where he's been in office for so long. And here's the thing, in my opinion, there's actually a resume now. You can see what Trump did in 4 years. Now you get to see what Biden's done in 4 years. So, I mean, to me, that's the thing that I can see, where everything has gone up. I think groceries has gone up 30%, fuel's gone up 40% under Biden, homes have gone up 40%. You look down the list of where, the inflation has made everything else go up. But say Trump doesn't win. Say Trump, if they get him thrown in prison, or if they whack him, whatever the plan is, what do you think Plan B is?
Plan B for the Republicans?
Yeah, anything. I think Nikki Haley was an obvious plant. I'm curious on what Plan B is if it goes that far.
So I think Plan A by all politicians is to stay in power. That's Plan A.
I agree with that.
And, I've heard the term that they spent, that a politician will spend 70% of their time, whether that's true or not. I mean, it's got to be somewhere close. 70% of their time is spent on how do I get reelected? Okay. I sure would like to see 95% on how do I make a better country?
Yeah.
Okay. And by doing my job, I get reelected. Right now, the place to be in politics is in the minority, because you get the same pay, you get the same benefits, you get to go on news and complain, for 15 or 20 or 30 seconds, and then you don't have any responsibility.
Sounds just like the Republican Party.
Yeah, exactly. So, again,
which I'm totally disgusted with.
I keep coming back to the same thing, that all of these items, what kind of job is Biden doing versus what did Trump do? I mean, it's obvious when you look at the numbers to me that one was way better than the other. No question about it. Will things, if President Trump gets reelected again, rather, will it solve the problem? I don't think so. Now we may get lower gas prices. We may get lower.
I think the economy will get better.
Right. But it won't solve.
I don't think he's going to be able to go out of the deep-rooted issues.
It won't solve the overall problem.
Yeah.
The overall problem has to be solved before Creed is, an adult. that you got to have people in there that are here. Again, I've said it, several times here. They're here for the country. They're not here for this agenda. Mm-hmm. And right now, it's agenda driven. And it's, I think that is so detrimental. And I wish I had, where I could say this guy, would have been or would be, an outstanding, president. Outstanding. And people where the country could get behind him. Mm-hmm. The country was behind, Reagan.
That's probably our last one.
Yeah. Country was behind Eisenhower. I mean, the country was behind Kennedy. Kennedy couldn't run as a Democrat today.
Yeah.
He'd be Republican.
Yep.
We've lost that. And I think we really need to really get back to it.
I think what ends up happening is how, because they keep, it seems like Republican and Democrats keep throwing these bought and paid for candidates. And at least Trump seems like the only one that seems like from the outside. And I think, in my opinion, that's why he's starting to get so much more, he's gaining a lot of traction. I'm just watching guys that used to be Democrats that are now, adding to his campaign, guys that hated him now that are adding to his campaign. I'm seeing where I think people are waking up in one perspective, seeing that, all right, this thing is rigged. And I think a lot of people are wondering what the heck they can do. And I think that's the frustration level for most Americans, it feels like right now, including me, especially for my kids. I think we're fine right now. It just doesn't feel like it's going to be fine going forward.
I heard a couple of days ago that 1/4 of U.S. families or people in the United States miss a meal in order to pay the bills. That shouldn't happen. That just absolutely shouldn't happen.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And that's where, again, leadership has to step up. All of our agencies are too big. They're too bogged down in the bureaucratic, nightmare of paperwork. Well, I don't have paper anymore, but all the rules and regulations, and a lot of those are, those come from those agencies themselves. So the entire structure, and I think Mr. Perot, going back to him, I think he would have made a tremendous impact, with his insight and his again desire to serve as opposed to desire to get.
I agree.
So I think that's huge. Service is big. I mean, that's been, my entire life has been, oriented that way. And so it's no surprise that that's what I believe.
Well, and it's something that you're doing now that you've retired from all these different things. Now your give back is with your canine unit. So tell me talk about what you do with the canine. Basically your stuff that you do now on the side now that you're retired.
Yeah, retired. I don't know how I had time to go to work, John.
Or even come rope.
I consider myself to be extraordinarily fortunate in terms of my my professional career. The Marine Corps was great, as I've said already. Law enforcement was great, but I also and as a result of that, I feel that I owe something back. To not just to the organization so much, but rather the people. There were people that came in the Marine Corps before me that made it what it was. And, I'd like to think that, I can help in some way. And the same thing with law enforcement. So let's go to the Marine Corps, the military side first. That's, there's a lot of choices of things you can do when you retire. You can go volunteer, this, that, and the other thing. And so, I made a conscious decision after meeting you the first time and being at the school there in Stephenville, at Lone Star Arena, that, hey, this thing, if it grows legs, because it was called the American Military Celebration that year, if this grows some legs, this is going to have an impact on people, a very positive impact. I mean, I could see that clearly. And one of the reasons I could see it was because as I'm in the school, I'm, realizing certain things about myself. Hey, here I am, and I'll share this, but in some little bit of it. So here I am at this school, and there's about 50% of my peers that were Cobra pilots that are no longer alive. Okay, for various reasons. crashes and so forth, Grenada and shoot downs and such. How do I get to be so lucky? Here I am on a horse, and I'm with these other veterans, and I'm winning this buckle, and I'm going, why? Why me? And I had this conversation with Trey, and it got pretty emotional for me, and I realized that I got to try to do something. I want to stay involved. I want to help. Okay, so that's when I came out to the parking lot and said, "Hey, what I think my question is, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Right, right. And I said, if there's a possibility, we could go see Ross Jr. and of course that's how it turned out. On the search and rescue side, so again, I've been a huge proponent of law enforcement. Had a great career there. Loved it. I've been blessed physically with my health and so forth going forward. Being active and such, and can still do a lot of things that guys my age, in some cases can't do. So I wanted to stay involved. Well, how do you do that? Well, I'm not going to be a trooper anymore. I'm not going to be a cop anymore, anything like that. But there's a real need. Where is the need? Well, search and rescue. Well, most of the search and rescue, the vast majority of it, in this country, is volunteer. It's not paid services. Okay, so I looked into that, and I said, well, there's a couple of teams here in the Metroplex, and went and talked to them, interviewed, and said, yeah, this is something I'd like to do. Well, then there was a canine team, and they had 3 different disciplines, and so I said, well, after being there for a little bit, I said, which one gets deployed the most? Because I'm very much a type A. I want to be in the game. I want to be a starter. I don't want to be sitting on the bench. Well, the trailing, the sense-specific trailing. Okay, well, that's what I want to do. I didn't even know much about it. Yeah. Well, what do you use for those? Well, we use bloodhounds. All right, I'm going to get one, kind of thing. And anyhow, I've been very fortunate. So I've been on hundreds and hundreds of searches, and I'm on my 2nd bloodhound now, and I also have a French hound called an Artois hound. And in fact, 3 days ago, she just became mission ready not long ago. 3 days ago, we did a trail. I haven't even told you about this one yet. We went out and trailed a 67-year-old woman for about 1.5 miles. She'd been missing for over 6 hours. And we found her face down in a bar ditch, and she's fine now. So it's a great feeling to be able to bring that to the table. Most law enforcement agencies don't have that capability, and so they use the volunteer side. So I decided to do that, and
because this is a non-paid thing that you do because they don't have the funding for this, correct?
I lose money. Yeah. So. No, it's all in.
But this is something the police force doesn't have because they can't afford it.
Most don't have it. Well, it's not a question they can't afford it. I think you don't have that many missing people per jurisdiction to justify what it takes to have a sense-specific trailing dog.
Got it.
Okay, they have narcotics dogs, and then you have, TSA has explosive detection dogs and that kind of thing, and there's human remains dogs. Those, but sense-specific trailing, where you have to have 2 things. You have to have a place where that person was last known to be, and then you have to have something that has their scent on it. So when I have those 2 things, then I can deploy my dog and follow along on that trail of skin cells, and hopefully.
So how does that? So how does the skin cells work? So when you end up getting a scent for that dog, how is it able to track that person?
So it's all part of a very structured training program, just like learning how to rope is. You start a young dog out, but as humans, we're shedding off skin cells constantly, and those cells are coming off in little clumps called rafts, and we're putting off about 40,000 rafts a minute, is what we're told. And the dog needs one here, one there to follow that. Now everybody's different. They all smell different when they're coming off. So we have that scent article from that person. It could be yesterday's sock, or, I've used a lot of different things. If it's a guy, somebody who's bailed out of a car after a traffic, chase or something, then I'll use the steering wheel. Let the dog sniff the steering wheel or the seat, and then we'll go trail him from there. And what I'll do is I'll put the harness on the dog. When the harness goes on, that's the on switch. And from that point on, when I give the scent to the dog, all they will look for is that scent. It doesn't matter how many other people are out there. Look for that specific scent. And that's through a training process, where you build the dog up from doing very short motivational trails, and then you build them up over time to where you can go out further, and where the trails get older and older and older. Because and it doesn't always work. You can have days where it's too hot, it's too windy, or as we've had recently, heavy rains, and that washes it away. So you're not 100% successful at this.
And also, how long do them skin cells keep their odor?
Yeah, that's a question that nobody knows the answer to.
But then a few days, but hardly ever a week, something like that.
The things that are good for trailing is when there's no wind and it's foggy and misty and those kind of things, and it just stays there. Things that are bad are high wind and high heat and heavy rain.
Got it.
That would do it. So there's my bloodhound right now is his oldest trail that he was successful on, where he found the person, was 33 hours. And I would never suggest that he could do that every time, but in that case he did. My first bloodhound found somebody that had been missing for 81 hours. Again, I would never suggest that could be done routinely at all, but in that case, everything lined up. It was, we were in the woods, heavy woods, and so things were kind of moist, and so the scent apparently stayed there, and he was able to find him when. The one a couple of days ago was interesting because the helicopter was up, the drones were up, they were using the heat signatures, with the infrared, and they never saw the lady, and she was right out in the bar ditch. So we were able. The dog went right up to her.
Well, I remember one of the stories. I think a lot of people here in Texas will remember. Was it a year ago? The FedEx. Are you free to talk about that one?
Probably not. At this point, because it's still in litigation. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very sad story. It's, but it shows again what the capability of the dog is. Or in this case, the dog was able to indicate that this particular little girl had not walked away from the property. That she obviously wasn't there, but she had not walked away. And with working the dog, I can never tell exactly what happened. If somebody gets picked up by a vehicle, I can never say they got picked up by a vehicle. What I can say is my dog indicates that the trail ends here. Mm-hmm. Now that's up to the detectives at that point.
Because at one point in time they were looking through the woods, right? Because they were thinking that's where she had maybe went to, but then
and then the dog said that wasn't the case,
and then they were able to. I guess you're probably not allowed to talk to it after that, but
that's probably better. Yeah, probably better we leave it right there.
All right. What about some of the other ones that you're free to talk about, just to where you can have an idea of like where them dogs are able to go, how they're able to find them, and then also some of the dangers of this? Because I also remember you kind of run into a couple water moccasins on a couple of these these ventures.
Yeah, well, the water moccasin was an interesting one. So this was a young man who was upset for whatever reason, and he left the high school, ran off into the woods, and this was not far from Lake Grapevine. And so and in conjunction with the helicopter with Perot, the gentleman who took my place when I retired was flying the helicopter that day, and it was right next to the Perot ranch, and so he came over and because again they offer the service up to help. So he's looking for this kid who's down in very, very thick woods, we thought. And so I trailed him, and I was trailing in a big, loop through this thing. I stepped across the creek. Of course, the dog's on a leash. I mean, a lead. It's about a 30-foot lead. So he's out in front of me with his nose down pulling. I have a police officer behind me, and I step on a rock to go over a creek, and then the police officer says, "Snake." And so I look down, and sure enough, there's a water moccasin, and he wants to come along with me. So for about 30 feet, he was right there, but my dog just kept on going. And obviously we just kept going at that point. You never know. I mean, that dog has been bitten by
Copperhead.
Copperhead, 3 years ago now, on a search, and recovered from it. Of course, they have, they all have their snake shots. My dogs have snake shots, so it mitigates to a great degree the effect of it. But I got bit by a copperhead as well. But this young man, so he gave us a good chase, and then finally he came out of the woods, not terribly far from where he started, and he said, and the dog is baying because the trail is getting hot, getting hotter. And he said,
So what do you mean baying?
Instead of barking, they're, the bloodhounds, they bay. They don't give you the sharp bark. It's a, everybody's heard the bloodhound noise, but he said, I can't get away from the dog. So he came out and decided that was enough of that. I've had that on 2 criminal cases too, where the perpetrator, the dog was baying, and one of them actually called 911 and said, "I want to give up." So it's kind of neat. It's very rewarding. It's frustrating sometimes because you don't always have, you don't always get the solution you want, or know what exactly happened. But when it does go well, then it's a good deal. And again, it's part of that service deal. I had one very sad case. I won't do all the details, but a young girl took her own life, and we found her, and that's tough.
Yeah,
but I would much rather that my dog and myself, find her than her little brother or her mother or father. And so that's
and I would think the closure.
So, you're providing closure.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah. And when you find them alive, like the other day, that's even better.
And it's worth it. And that's your give back now that you've done all this stuff.
It is. Yeah. I mean, it's exactly, that's my give back. And hopefully, it'll generate some interest to somebody younger than myself that wants to get involved, that I can then pass it on, pass that knowledge, that, a little bit that I have about it, and, get somebody else involved with it. So.
Well, another give back that we have going on that just keeps on getting bigger every year is our Liberty and Loyalty Foundation. And you said this thing was going to go gangbusters, I remember a couple of years ago, and it's feels like it's starting to get there. It's been great on what we've been able to accomplish. It's just something that I know Jackie and I a long time ago in 2013 was just something, a conversation. And then times I've prayed about it and things like that, and what can I do? And then all of a sudden you watch and see how he's just put it right in front of us on the amount of people that we've been able to help through this foundation. And you're a huge part of it in what you've done. And I always talk about your last name being Force, but you're truly the driving force behind this. But
yeah, I've had a lot of fun with that last name.
Yeah, what was your call sign?
Lethal.
I loved it. Even on your headstall.
Yeah, exactly. No, excuse me. You don't know where these things are going to go. As I said before, I could see after my first year that this thing certainly had potential. And so, with Ross getting on board and, being able to build, through that, helping us build this up, away it goes. The rewarding part is, initially it was all like, how much money can we raise? How much money can we do? And then we help that, a family out there. And it's gone so much further beyond that. And we don't even know who we're going to help. Mm-hmm. That's the beauty of it. You have no idea. I mean, the first year at our gala, we're sitting there and one of the wives says, Bill, this saved our marriage and saved his life. I'm like, going, really?
Mm-hmm.
I've had people report to me that the wives sitting in the stands up there at NRS the first year they were there in tears, saying they hadn't seen their husbands, like this, since before they left to go to, Iraq or Afghanistan, So, it's incredible
what's been great is that what's been great to me to have for you on my, right beside me through this was, this was just an idea that I had, was curious to, if what I did could, and what I was good at with the talents that God blessed me with, is this going to be something that I would be able to do something and do good with it? And so this was just an idea of like, man, I wonder if the guys would enjoy this. I wonder if there's enough guys that would, think that this was, hey, thanks, Charlie, this took my mind off it for a day. Or that what I didn't realize was how much what I showed them that I get to do every day, the amount of guys that came back and said this was the best day of their life. And that's when it truly touched me. It was like, my goodness, for one, I didn't realize how lucky was I got to do what I got to do. Like, I get to do this. I don't have to do this. I get to do this. And they really helped me kind of gain that perspective of what my life was and appreciation for it. But then also to be able to see the reactions of these guys that when they were able to go, basically, like I said, do what I got to do all the time when they were able to rope with the guys going to the NFR. They were able to rope with each other, get the camaraderie that they missed so much. And were the ideas that we've been able to, through our ops team and through the board, be able to get that 30,000 foot view to where how can we touch up on this and how can we touch up on that? And that's what's been so handy for me to have is your perspective of it, because you were in those situations. This was just an idea that I had, and then just to be able to hear the testimonies of some of the guys and not only the guys, but then the families, the families have just as much sacrifices.
That's the magic part of it. You think, okay, I'm going to have this guy rope today and it's going to make the day great. And then you find out that because of that, it's grown these tentacles and it's expanded out and you've impacted, so many more people. And, the testimony that we heard on the video now from our branding, with Brian and his wife was just phenomenal. I mean, who would have thought that was, that could ever happen? So yeah, it's, and the way that, one of the fun parts is that the guys that are roping, I mean, they can win a lot of good stuff, and that's meaningful. Hey, I won a saddle, I won a buckle, I've won $10,000.
Got to rope with Junior Noguera or Caleb Driggers.
Exactly, and it's that in alone is magic, right? Well, then okay, we're able to raise money, and we've donated to Building Homes for Heroes. So now we have that family coming in, and they're recipients of something that we've done. And now we've got the Brotherhood for the Fallen, and we're able to support them financially. And what do? Well, they support the families of law enforcement officers killed violently in the line of duty. Well, this has nothing to do with team roping. This has to do now with the families, and as our mission statement says, that we support veterans, first responders, and their families through life-changing experiences offered by the Western lifestyle. So away it goes. Well, then this past November, we brought in Charlie 5. Well, this has nothing to do with team roping per se. This is an organization that marries up a horse with a PTSD sufferer, and regardless of discipline, then you watch the magic happen. And we're able to support that with a nice checks too. So
and it's amazing, and it's amazing too what Charlie 5 is doing for a lot of you guys that don't understand as well is, through horsemanship, you'll find out a lot of what is on the inside of you. Because if you have a tendency to be a little aggressive with your hands, it shows in your horsemanship. If you have a tendency to be a little short-tempered, it shows in your temperament. If you have a tendency to be a little passive, then your horse is going to run all over you and it'll show in your horsemanship. It's amazing what being around horses will actually bring out on the inside of you. But when you guys are able to create a bond and you guys are able to get and solve that puzzle, what I've seen so many guys do is, what about Tim Kilner? Just watching that relationship with your horse.
Well, that's one that I'll never ever forget. Tim has become a dear friend, and he's an ambassador, of course, to Liberty and Loyalty. And Tim, I don't even think had ever even been on a horse. And, Tim was an Army sniper, of course, and I hate to use the term successful, but he was a very successful sniper. And but he also was blown up, an IED, and so he's 100% disabled. But Tim came to the house, my arena one day, and with another one of our ambassadors, Blake Mallory, who Blake's, what a great guy. I mean, for so many reasons. But they came to the house and, hey, Tim, do you want to ride? No, I'm fine watching. And then a few minutes later, while it was, well, what's this horse's name? Well, it's Quigley. Well, what's this one? Well, that's Preacher. What's this one? It's Sniper. Oh, can I ride him? Well, I'm going to tell you, Charlie, from that day forward, and I've mentioned this before, nobody else ever rode Sniper. Okay, and that was 2.5 years ago, I guess. Probably 3 years ago. At any rate, nobody ever, because he had been retired. He was my rope horse. He retired. So nobody rode Sniper except for Tim. And he'd come to the house and he'd give him treats. I don't even know if I was home half the time when he came over to do it. And, that created this bond. And then it got Tim involved with what we're doing. And now he's an ambassador. He's integral to to our gala preparation. And, he's got so many good ideas. Just a guy who's always willing to step up. And then, unfortunately, about 3 weeks ago, I had to put Sniper down, and I called Tim and I said, "Hey, I'm just to let you know, this is," and he knew it was coming, of course. But I said, "Hey, it's time. We're gonna do this." And he goes, "I'll be right there." So he came over, and there was that closure then, and so now I'm trying to figure out who's the next Sniper is going to be, for Tim. But yeah, and again, I mean, what's the impact, on him? He's told me it's tremendous. And if you look at his testimonial, on our video from the branding, you'll see he's another guy who says, his purpose. I mean, this is a guy who's been through hell, right? He goes, my purpose is to make life better for others. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, this is a guy who,
served his country.
Yeah. I mean, he's he's working on beating cancer right now. I mean, good grief. I mean, let's go full circle right back to who do we need running this country? We need the Tim Kellners of the world running this country. The guys that have this passion and that are in it for us, not in it for them.
Yeah.
And he's the most perfect example you can think of.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's what I think Charlie Five does such a good job, because just having that bond with another animal and the horses and to be able to do what those guys are doing
well, and the way that came about was, I was watching Chris Cox one day, and I know you and Chris are good friends, and the Jeremy, who's in charge of Charlie Five, he started it, and he's on with Chris Cox, and I'm listening to that 30-minute story, and I'm saying to myself, we got to meet this guy. We got at least. So I found his phone number, okay, and called him, and then he started coming to our event on his own nickel, just coming to, and then that created this relationship that we have now. So,
and what's the new recent? There's a new recent horse that they had just gotten paired up with somebody here recently.
They did. So there's a retired Marine jet pilot who flies for Delta, and he and Jeremy. So his name's Derek. So Derek came last November to NRS, and he was monitoring the clinic. You probably didn't even know it, but he was there watching from the sidelines because he had this urge to start roping. He's a good friend of Todd Hornbuckles, another one of our ambassadors, of course. And so Todd put me in touch with him, and he's been coming out to my house and riding my horses and starting to rope. Well, he came to the clinic. Well, he met Jeremy, and they started talking a lot. Well, the next thing they know, Jeremy says, "Listen, you need to put in an application with us." And then their board, makes a selection of individuals. So they selected him to be the recipient, and they used some of our funding, of course, to make that happen. And that horse was selected and paired up with him. Was today, late last week. So the horse is actually at my house now.
Yeah.
So until he gets his barn built, but yeah, it's
been wild. It's been wild to where it's gone to. Like I said, this was something just to hope that we was able to make a great day for somebody. Now that we're changing lives, it's been a heck of a journey.
Yeah, and we look forward to what's going to happen next. I mean, this year looks like we're going to get bigger, more teams. It's really fun too. I talked to some of the guy, the pro side. I just saw Travis Graves up at the Cleveland Rodeo last weekend, and he said, "Hey, I'm looking forward to November. What's the date?" So, well, hey, it's going to be on the it's going to be the 9th and the 10th, the 8th, 9th, and 10th for him. I said, "You got," because I'll be there. I mean, that's how in Wesley Thorpe. I mean, same thing.
The camaraderie that I've been able to watch between the pros and then the military and first responders has been great, especially the guys that consistently make the NFR that are there every year. Yeah, there's so many of them that's created a bond outside of just the arena too.
It really is. A lot of ropings have pro-ams.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, I get to rope with Junior, okay, because but this is a different, and that's why we don't call it a pro-am.
Mm-hmm.
We call it a Mill First Pro because
it's hard to call somebody an amateur that can kill you in 57 different ways with their hands. And so
yeah, exactly.
let's be real here.
but the appreciation is different.
Yes.
Okay.
The respect.
Yeah, it really is, and it's on both sides.
Yes.
And it's phenomenal to watch.
Well, I remember that one year when it was outside, and that's the first time I truly felt God's presence in that event, when I was able to watch that military first responder pro roping, and I'm watching pro guys root for the guys that are either just barely staying on or caught their first one. I remember Big John turned his first one for Junior, and I mean, just
most of these pro-ams are like the 8th grade dance. The boys are lined up on one side, the girls are on the other.
This one was, it was everyone rooting for one another. And I remember my secretaries had never seen anything like it. My flaggers, everybody, because it was just such a culture that was so special and unique that, you don't see that in team roping world. And that's when I was like, man, this event has become more than just a team roping.
Yeah. And so, we keep that in mind. And, as we put the team together this year for the gala and then for the American Hero Celebration, that's the emphasis is on.
So other than, people just being able to donate to the foundation, another one of our big ways that we make a huge impact on being able, this will be our 5th home that we've been able to, through building homes with heroes this year, correct? This will be our 5th home.
Be the 5th year. Yeah.
So our gala this coming up September 21st.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we've separated the gala this year from the November week-long event, just because, as you mentioned earlier, there's so much going on that week. And so we
you're
thought
a lot more intimate with the barn and where this location is because you've been there so much. I would love for you to be able to describe this where we have our gala event this year on September 21st.
Well, again, we'll go back to the fantastic stuff that the Perot family's provided. So when you and I met with Ross several years ago, he offered up the barn. I put that in quotes. So when and he said, "Why don't you have your gala there?" And we said, "Well, thank you, but we're not quite, we're not ready for that yet." Well, this year we decided to take that plunge. So at his ranch, at Ross Jr.'s ranch, there is what's referred to as the Texas barn. And while I was working for him during that 12-year span is when that barn was built. And you've been there, you've seen it, but it is a venue that is second to none in this country. You don't decorate for your event. The barn is there, and it's unbelievable. It's magnificent. So he offered it up, and again, he's been very gracious with that, and we've taken advantage of it this year. So that'll be the evening of September 21st, and it's limited to 200 people, and we're going to have a great dinner, and then we're going to have a live auction that'll go on. Farron Lucero is going to be our master of ceremonies again, and he does
tremendous job.
Yeah, absolutely. Farron's great, and then Danny Griego, Nashville singer songwriter who has a real soft spot and has taken it to heart on helping veterans and first responders, is going to be our. He's bringing in the full band from Nashville, and it's I guess we'll call it outlaw country, if you will. So he's going to be the entertainment that night, and looking forward to just a great evening and a fundraising so that we can continue to support the organizations that we deem necessary and deserving.
Yeah,
and then helping our guys. So. It can't be emphasized enough. Everybody on our team is a volunteer, completely. It's kind of like my search thing. If we lose money, don't gain it. But
that's what's great about this foundation. There is no salaries.
Yeah.
Everybody does this to be.
It's going to be fun.
A great American, as you'd say.
Absolutely.
How would about if the guys want to come to the gala and come and support this and bid on some items? What are some ways that they can get involved?
Yeah, the gala will be on the website. We just put out a save the date notice, and so the tickets, invitations will go out, I believe it's going to be 8 weeks in advance, and then we'll have tickets on the website then as well. So that puts us basically the first week of August is when the tickets will be available.
And then it's coming up now to where our Horns and Heroes event is getting pretty close to deadline. So today's the 13th. We cut that out at June 15th, correct?
We've cut that off for June 15th, and this is for
the 8 headers and the 8 heelers that's going to be free to be able to come and join our roping clinic where Trey Johnson and I will be doing a free 2-day clinic at NRS. It'll be on Wednesday and Thursday.
This is going to be a tough selection process because we have well over 80 applicants for those
8 spots.
Those 18
or 16
spots. But yeah, so it's going to be tough.
Where can you remember? I know you've already taken a glance a little bit of some of the list. Where are some of these people from? What's some of the states?
It's probably easier to give the states they're not from.
Let's do the states that ain't. Yeah.
We've got them from Pennsylvania. We've got them from Maryland, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama.
We've almost covered 50.
Louisiana.
Dang near then, huh?
Yeah. I mean, obviously Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and California, Louisiana, Arizona, New Mexico. These are, Colorado. And I'm sure
we've almost covered all 50 states.
I'm sure I'm missing a few, but I know for a fact the ones I've just named.
That's pretty cool.
We have people and that's just for the school.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, when we get to the mill first roping.
Yeah. That's the one thing I always want to let everyone know. If you are a military or first responder and you rope, this is your roping. Now, there's only a few select to get to come to the clinic, but this roping is for everyone who's military and first responder.
Absolutely.
Bill, can you give them just a definition, though, on what first responder does mean?
Well, it's actually pretty simple. So those that respond to the scene of an incident, be it whatever it may be, that's a first responder.
So a police officer.
So that can be police,
firefighter,
fire. It can be search and rescue. Aircraft crews that EMS flights that go to
ambulance,
the scene, those kind of things. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we try to be as liberal as we possibly can with the definition because we want to be as inclusive as is possible.
Mm-hmm. But we also don't want to have to go down rabbit holes.
Right. Also staying true to what our definition of first responder. Those are the ones that go to.
Yeah. Okay? Open up too many can of worms on what's not. But clarify what it is. That way it's easier for people to understand.
We had 250 teams last year. I'd love to see that.
It was
number.
so big we had to move it another day.
Yeah, we have added a day.
But
hopefully I'd love to see us hit somewhere 350 to 400.
What is your take on military and first responders, or just anybody that even if they don't rope? I mean, how many guys do we have that come from the back east and just come to watch this event? Like, I keep telling everyone that I see, like, man, you just need to come to the event because this is your people. I watch a lot of guys that don't know a lot of the people there, but it doesn't take long for all of a sudden just that personality to fit, just that camaraderie.
You go back, that's the word, camaraderie right there. And you can go to a jackpot. That's great. And this is a jackpot, but it's different.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely different. And you're rooting for each other. It's hard to put your finger on other than to say it's different.
Yeah.
And absolutely, if you love the camaraderie side of it, the team roping is secondary to that. And then, by the way, the ranch rodeo event. Okay.
So Friday we'll start our open roping, which is all the top guys in the world. They'll come down there and they'll come rope, and that's at NRS on Friday. And then we'll also have our military first responder pro roping, was what we also talked about too, where the military and first responders get a chance to rope with the guys going to the NFR, which has got 10,000 added in the heading, 10,000 added in the heeling, and we'll have saddles and buckles given away. And that night is our ranch rodeo event. And this is for a lot of the guys that almost like your SWAT guys, the guys that just breathe fire and just want to go fast, you know. And there's a lot of those guys that we get throughout this event. And this is where the ranch rodeo is so much fun to watch. I've never seen anything more fun.
That actually know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the fun ones are the ones that don't.
Exactly right. The ones that just throw the rope away and jump off their horse and tackle the steer. That's the best. And also probably the commentating. You know, me and Blake Mallory, we do the commentating, so it gets pretty good right there. But yeah, that's at 7 o'clock that night at NRS, and that's where we turn 3 steers out in the middle of the arena. We put up a pin with a gate on it, and when 4-man team, they walk through the gate, and when the gate shuts, the time starts, and they have 4 minutes to tie 2 steers down and pin one. And whatever they came in the arena with, they have to leave with. So if they lost their hat, their shirt, or their underwear, or their rope, and I've seen all 4 of them be lost at one point in time, they have to grab all of them and get the gate shut in the first 4 minutes.
Remember the first year that we had the tail of a rope was underneath the gate?
Yeah.
There couldn't have been 6 inches
That's
of rope.
a Bobby joke. Come on, man. Yeah. But yeah.
And this is why.
This is good watching.
Yeah. I mean, encourage everybody to, I mean, whether you're rope or not, come to this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just
the entertainment of it for that is great.
Yeah, we'll have a concert after that. You know, it's just
on Saturday, that's when we have our military first responder event. So the military and first responders, they'll rope their first 3 rounds, and after 3 is when we take the top 15 in the average of those top 3 rounds, and those guys will progress to our NFR showdown on Sunday at Cowtown Coliseum.
We'll do the back number ceremony. But
Saturday night we're going to try to get a little concert going and have a back number ceremony just like the NFR. This year I'm trying to get all 15 rodeo committees to jump on. Last year we had 5. We had San Antonio, Austin, Fort Worth, one of my hometowns, St. Paul, Oregon, and Prescott, Arizona.
Yep.
Those 5 rodeo committees donated $2,000 in a back number. And so those guys got back numbers when they made it. This year, I'm trying to get all 15 back numbers sold, and that money will go into the pot. So my goal this year is I'm hoping we're going to have 60,000 added to the military first responder pro.
That'd be tremendous.
For 15,000 for the header to win it, 15,000 for the heeler to win it, and if we can get all 15 back numbers sold, then that 15,000 will go in the pot as well as what their fees are. And so that could be one heck of a open. And then on Sunday they get to go and they get to compete along with the NFR guys getting ready for the NFR and what it feels like to rope with the NFR.
Yeah, we'll be at Cowtown Coliseum in Fort Worth. This will be our 3rd year there. They've welcomed us with open arms.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just tremendous. And the improvements that they've done to that facility.
Yes, absolutely.
Is great. And then, of course, Cowboy Channel stepping up and putting us on. And
yeah, they got a chance to be live on the Cowboy Channel.
You and I have done.
And X Factor comes and does all the events over there at NRS, and those events are all live. And also, too, is they do a lot of filming and do a lot of stuff and promote our event. They come and film the NFR Showdown, and then they do a lot of promotions all year long for us. So, I mean, both of those have done a great job promoting this event.
It's just all part of it. It's this tremendous growth that we're experiencing. And, you know, I had a lady call me last week and just out of the blue, and how do I volunteer?
Yeah.
I said, Are you a roper? No, I used to own a horse when I was a little girl, but I saw you guys and I want to help. So I gave her Dre's number, and now she's gonna come up here and help.
Yeah, the amount of volunteers that I run into throughout the year at the clinics that I do, and the guys that want to be involved and sponsor the roping or just donate. It's been fascinating. I mean, this year I think we're going to exceed over $1 million raised.
Yeah, this will be the million. We should hit the $1 million of the money paid out to both their
first
responders
and families.
Yep, and their families. Perfect. Yeah, pretty neat stuff.
The NFR Showdown is the funnest for me, though, because that's where I get to let that. My goal behind that was to give the military and first responders the NFR experience. And so when those 15 teams make it, I want them to where when we start that thing, they get to go and do the grand entry just like the NFR guys do. Because that was a big deal. The back number deal and the NFR was a big deal for me, and the grand entry. And so they get to all ride behind their branch flags, just like how we do at the NFR and ride behind our state flag. So they get that experience. They get to watch the top 15 guys in the world going at it and getting ready for the NFR because the setup is exactly the same as the Thomas and Mack. And then they get to go and rope in the same setting as live on the Cowboy Channel. And last year when Big John and Jersey won it, that was exactly like I would have imagined it. When they come out, someone videoed it. It was the coolest video.
It was great. And it could have
come in. You couldn't tell if they won the average of the NFR or the roping.
Yeah.
And then I got to interview them live out there on the stage floor with the sponsors that sponsored Ariat, sponsored Driver Land and Cattle. And, what was cool about that was the sponsors got to see the emotion of what it was like for those guys to. This has turned out to be one of the biggest military first responders event that I know of. I'm not saying that because it's ours, but the payout and the experience has gotten to where it's been very impactful.
We've got a really neat deal this year too. We've had a sponsor step up and buy essentially the majority of the tickets in the Coliseum, and so we're going to be able to take all of those and donate those to various military first responder organizations.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
So these guys and girls, they'll get to come in, with their families and watch this without.
My goal this year, one of the other goals I have besides getting the back number sold out for the rodeo committees, the next one is to pack that event. If we can pack that facility, because the one thing that you can't pay for is that experience when you ring the bell and just just make one of those runs and the crowd goes crazy. It's the coolest feeling that I've ever experienced.
Well, my goal is to pack it this year.
That's
what I'm working on.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm hoping this year we're going to be able to do it. So
that's why
I just encourage everyone, if you can't donate, just please come and if you can watch it, great. If you can come, even better, because I want to blow the top off that thing this year.
Oh, it's so much fun. Watching the pros run and then watching the military first responder guys. I mean, it's. Being part of that last year.
And the ranch rodeo, the top 4 ranch rodeo. Those will be in it too, because that's one of the best things to watch.
We have our own in-house clown.
Yeah. Blake Mallory.
So Blake Mallory.
Mm-hmm. He'll be camoed up.
And
he nailed it last year.
He's second to none.
He did great.
Yeah, he's ready. I was talking to him the other day, and he's got his outfit ready to go.
So do we have ways to where if they want to come and get tickets, if they want to just donate, or if they want to sponsor, what are some ways that people can get involved?
Everything on the website.
Liberty and Loyalty Foundation, and that'll walk you through everything.
That'll walk you through everything.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, Bill, thanks for coming out, and thanks for coming and roping with me. I'm glad.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity. Again, you look for these. I don't know if you look for things to do, but things kind of come up, and you go, this strikes my fancy, and it's something that I think I might be good at, and help with, and so.
Well, just to watch how much your roping has grown, and this year we're hoping to get some World Series ropings, and hopefully we'll be able to get that goal met where we can get to the World Series finals in Vegas. So we're on the right track.
That's the goal.
Well, I appreciated your friendship. You've become a heck of a mentor to me out of the arena and away from this event as well. I mean, just the things that I owe you, just the amount of times I probably would have been thrown in jail if it wasn't for you. Either I'd have been one of the January 6th prisoners. Luckily, you kept me from going to that fiasco. And then the amount of times that I've almost intentionally got into some situations I shouldn't have, and you were able to show me how the right way to handle the situation without always having to throw your dukes up.
Yeah,
so
I remember that one.
Yeah, so I appreciate the mentorship.
Here, I thought it was just the grammar on some of your writings.
So not only do I owe you a few steaks, but a lot of bonds that I'd have had to come up with.
It's
bail bond.
It's been fun, and I'm not saying that past tense. I mean, it is fun. I look forward to going forward. I mean, you and Jackie, I come down here and it's like it's like being at home. It's just great. So you guys are wonderful. What a family. Love watching the kids. And watching the kids grow, and of course, Journey, taking me out every time I come down here. I got to pick her up so I can go see the kittens.
Yeah.
So it's really good. So.
Well, and I appreciate too just the experience I've got to experience too with being able to go shoot and do things where I get outside of my industry. I get side of it's I've roped and rode horses plenty, and for me to be able to get to go and when we got to go to the air marshal and go shoot with him and do the 3 guns up there, and just a lot of the experiences I've got to go do where I would have never been able to do before has been fun.
We'll do more.
And getting on Ross Perot's helicopter. That was cool.
There you go.
That was really cool.
We'll do more.
Awesome.
As I'll end my part with this. I'll say, and I've been asked many times, do you miss flying? Because I don't fly anymore. And I say there's there's a lot more to see out of the windshield than there's a rearview mirror.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about this too. You know, I mean, the stuff we've done has been great, and I cherish it. The stuff we're going to do is going to be even greater.
Yeah, I'm with you,
yeah.
and I can't wait for this year. It's going to be fun, and it's nice to be able to help those who've sacrificed and done so much for us. So, thank you for your service, and thanks for coming on this podcast. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, thank you.